Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
He is Dr. Austin Crow, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, joining us this morning, and he will also be on the sidelines, bundled up and coaching, helping coach level 2. First, I got to ask, last week we asked you, we were talking about your final regular season game. How does that one last week rank up there for you?
Ooh, yeah, it took a couple years off our life, for sure. It was a hard-fought game. We knew second time around playing a team is always harder, right? You're known adversary, and when it's playoff season, it's everyone's fighting for their lives, right? So
right.
Everyone's going to be giving 100%. So it was a great game. Hats off to Fall Creek. They played a great one, and we were able to come away with a big win by blocking a field goal. So it was definitely more exciting than we were hoping for, but our boys earned the win. So it was definitely exciting. Again, maybe a little more exciting than we were looking for.
Right, and another tough test tonight, going up against a Luther tonight too.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it should be a good team. They play in a tough conference down there and put together a pretty good season. So they have some players for sure. They're not here by accident. So we know if we do what we're supposed to do, we should be in pretty good shape. But we're a little bit banged up right now. We have a couple of our key players that have some ankle injuries. That's the injury du jour over here at Regis. We're hoping they're going to be able to play, but we have at least one of them for sure won't, and then a couple that are going to be kind of questionable. So Coach Brenner and I were already chatting this morning about our plans for our injured players. So we're looking ahead. He said to say hi to you too.
Oh, well, tell him I said hi too. So I appreciate that, and best of luck to your crew tonight there, sir. So I'm going to be following along, so I might be texting you afterwards.
There you go. I'll be ready.
Hey, speaking of injuries and such, I want to start off with the Pack, and I know I was texting you last Sunday about Jordan Love because everybody thought did he re-aggravate his knee injury, but it ended up being a groin injury, and he ended up leaving the game. He did return to practice yesterday. There is a hope from him that he will play this weekend. My question is, if it's raining, which some of the forecast is calling for, and the field is slippery, how much does that factor into a player playing, like maybe Jordan Love, if there's a groin injury involved?
Yeah, that definitely does come into play, no question about it. I think when it's, first off, temperature, I know it's maybe not going to be quite as cold there, but it certainly temperature does, and then conditions, field conditions absolutely do play a role. So when you have slippery conditions, it's much more likely to put stress on the legs in this case, with cutting and running. And obviously it was a good sign to see him back running around already. Those can be pretty nasty. Just like any other musculoskeletal injury, which we've talked about numerous times because they're a common injury, they can be mild, they can be severe. And even when they're pretty bad in the front end, sometimes people bounce back pretty quickly, sometimes they don't. So, I've seen people come back in a week. I've seen people take 6 weeks, 8 weeks. They can be pretty bad at times. So certainly his turnaround has been a good sign. So my suspicion is that he will be able to play. But it's going to be one of those game time decisions. They're going to get him up, see how he's moving, see how he's feeling. The one kind of ace up your guys' sleeve is it's a bye week next week for you, so you have a little bit more leeway if he's not feeling truly 100% to say, maybe we can push it a little bit. But the problem with these is often if you re-injure them, it really can be a big, big setback. So truthfully, I think it's most likely they're going to say, look, are you ready and you feeling good? It's a yes, no, because they don't want to see him get set back for a 4 to 6 week injury and miss a big chunk of the season. So, it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out.
That's I was going to ask you after that, what would be the risk of him playing out there, further injuring that? And I know we've talked about this before, but with it being a groin, could that turn into that quote unquote sports hernia type of injury if he makes it worse?
It shouldn't, even though it's the same muscle involved. So one of the quote unquote causes of sports hernia is the groin insertion on the pubic bone up front in the pelvis. This injury is generally going to be at the junction between the muscle and the tendon, so it's further down. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I think the concern is that you basically re-injure it and it's a big setback, or frankly worsen it further and turn it into a month and a half type recovery, which is certainly not what anyone wants. But there are times these do heal that quickly where it's a mild tweak, but they hurt a lot. You really can't. When you think of that, you're like, well, I don't really use my groin muscle except side-to-side cutting. It's really involved in all of running and moving. Maybe not as much as with cutting and pivoting, but you get a quarterback who's already, I mean, he's truthfully probably not 100% from the knee quite yet. Then you add this onto it. It's like, geez, now we're really worrying about mobility, his ability to move side to side. And, you know, that's the last thing you want as your quarterback to be a sitting duck in the pocket because he can't move. So I'm sure they'll get him out, move around. And I don't, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he was full go at practice yesterday, but I do believe I heard he was moving around pretty well. So that, again, is a good sign.
Yeah, officially was limited. I think I saw a video like he was doing the running over the pads, you know, those like, I call it the old school tires, but they're not tires anymore.
That's right.
Over there. So staying with the Packers, another injury that I think kind of looked weird and we're kind of wondering what was happening, but it was the last defensive play, and Jair Alexander was running through the end zone thinking he was going to catch it, but then he ends up like hobbling and like running off the field on one leg. Ended up he had an MRI. They said it came back okay, but they're calling it a knee injury, and he hasn't practiced over there. So if the MRI is good, but he's not practicing, it's a knee injury. What are maybe some of the possible options that what type of injury that could be?
Yeah, I mean, it did look funny. I mean, you can't really look at it and be like, aha, that's where he hurt it. It was just kind of a weird step, right?
Yeah.
So ironically, sometimes those can be really bad injuries. You know, you have a guy who, I think we've mentioned this in the past, if you ever see a football or baseball or basketball player make a move or cut and they just kind of buckle without contact, that's generally actually a bad injury, which is somewhat surprising to people. But the MRI came back clean, so it wasn't that. And by bad, usually I mean ACL. It wasn't that. So maybe he just had like a little mild sprain in one of the ligaments with the knee kind of twisting funny. Low grade, of course, because it was higher grade that would popped up on the MRI. So a low grade, let's say MCL or LCL. And with that, if the knee shifts just a tiny bit, sometimes you can get a little bit of bone bruise that goes along with that. And all of a sudden, you know, they have that deep ache that goes along with it, makes it hard to run. And you're right, he has been quite limited this whole week. So it suggests that something occurred. But, I mean, if I had to throw out a guess, it would be a low-grade collateral injury, maybe with an associated bone bruise. Nothing serious long-term, but they can be tricky to play through, so he may miss some time.
So, and then with that too, Evan Williams, their safety, left the game early due to a hamstring injury. So I guess, you know, combining Jordan Love, Jair, and Evan Williams with their type of injuries, and assuming it is raining and the field conditions are going to be slippery, is that almost worst case scenario for those guys potentially playing because it adds that factor of the field conditions out there?
It definitely plays a role. I mean, I think those type of, and it does depend on the injury, right? I mean, there's some injuries it doesn't matter quite as much, but, you know, if you worry about someone taking a bad step and slipping, you know, we all know that kind of jars the body, and so you do worry about that potentially. I mean, I think I'd be more worried about that with a groin than a hamstring probably, although if you did kind of slip with your leg going forward and put a bunch of tension on the hamstring, that certainly could irritate it as well. Again, without knowing exactly what's going on with Jair's knee, it's hard to say for sure, but any kind of ligament injury, again, if that's what it is, I mean, if your knee slips, same thing. You put a lot of stress right through the joint quickly. That can aggravate it. Unlikely to re-injure it, though. So I think once Jair gets back, he should be good to go. The question is, will he get back in time? But I think with both Williams and Jordan Love, I think those are guys that, again, that could play a bigger role potentially in their return today, or this week, I should say.
I got to ask you about one more football player with a knee, Puka Nacua. He apparently re-injured his knee again yesterday at practice, and he's been missing a ton of time this year with his knee injury. Now, there's reports saying it's not serious, but it's the same knee injury, or same knee, I should say, that has been plagued him where he sat out weeks 2 through 7. And, I mean, you saw him against Minnesota. You probably didn't want to see him play, that week.
Unfortunately, I did see him, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's got this knee injury that's going on, but it's not, you know, ACL or anything like that. What are maybe some possibilities that he's going through with a knee injury that keeps popping up?
That is weird. I will agree. I mean, I think first thing you get worried about is cartilage injury, so some kind of previous injury. And I don't know if he's ever had surgery in that knee. I don't think he has. I mean, you know, he has a cartilage injury that's kind of, again, flaring up here and there. Could be a small meniscal tear where they're like, look, we want to avoid surgery if we can. We'll try to get through the season, and it just pops up and pain, swelling, that kind of thing. Certainly a partial ligament injury as well. So maybe a partial ACL, PCL, something along those lines. But it is certainly weird. I mean, generally speaking, when you get over those injuries, they usually are behind the athlete, and they kind of have this recurring one, it's like I don't know what to make of that. You know, it is definitely atypical. So, but if I had to throw out a guess, it'd be either meniscal or cartilage, because those would be things that you kind of maybe come back from, but then it flares right back up. But that is definitely a guess. It's hard to say for sure.
Then I got to ask you about Ohtani. Slightly dislocated shoulder sliding into second base, but he still played a couple games after. But you could tell he was not the same Ohtani afterwards.
Oh, for sure.
And he was wearing this brace. It was like a heated brace on his shoulder pregame, and he said it was a device that keeps my shoulder warm, recommended by the Dodgers trainers over there. Do you think it's potential? I know the main talk now is he going to have surgery or not? Do you think he's going to? It's kind of trending, or do you think the odds are of him having surgery are fairly high?
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously they have an MRI looking at the extent of the tear. So, I mean, with his shoulder, what he did is he subluxed it, right? So it didn't come all the way out. It is a subtle distinction, but a subluxation is where the joint starts to move out, but the joint doesn't fully dislocate. So in this case, it's the humeral head coming out of the glenoid. So the humeral head slides out. It doesn't fully go out, but it shifts over the lip and then pops back. So, I mean, anyone who's had one of those knows, I mean, you feel it, though. I mean, it is my shoulder did like a clunk, clunk. And when that happens, you universally damage the shoulder 100% of the time. Generally speaking, it's going to be an injury to the labrum. So the labrum is kind of that little fibrocartilage gasket, if you will, that runs around the socket. It helps stabilize the shoulder. Occasionally it will be the ligament or bones, but usually it's going to be a labral injury. So they're going to see the extent of that. If it's a relatively small tear, I mean, they can try rehab those, strengthening exercises, see if they can get the shoulder stabilized, but those don't usually heal up real well, but they can be compensated for. So, I mean, they're going to run him through kind of a battery of tests and exercises and see, but, I mean, if they see a nasty labral tear, I'm guessing they're going to recommend surgery. I mean, if you look at their studies that look at recurrence rates, I mean, unfortunately, they're fairly high, especially, you know, in certain sports. Now, baseball actually is relatively low risk because, you know, you take a sport like football or rugby or basketball where there's a lot of times where your arm is going up high and coming back. It's like the motion of throwing a baseball, bringing the arm way back up and out, because it's his non-throwing shoulder, if I remember correctly. So, you know, that's going to make a big difference for him. And so, again, if I'm guessing, I bet he does have it done because it's a relatively minimally invasive surgery and recurrence rate after surgery is very low. Whereas on the flip side, trying to avoid surgery, the recurrence rate is fairly high. And what they don't want to do is have him go back out and, you know, week one of next season, sublux or dislocate, and bam, lose the whole season. So there's a good chance they could get it done in the off season and get him back to 100%. So if I'm a bet man, I bet he has it fixed, but obviously it depends on the extent of the injury on the MRI.
I'm looking at a picture of that shoulder heat massage thing, a Venom. It's called a Venom pad or whatever you want to call it, sling on there. I mean, it looks like it's a big thing over there. Is it just essentially just to keep the muscles and the ligaments or everything just loose and warm, so he's not kind of, I guess, going in cold, if you will?
Tighten, yeah. I mean, something along those lines. I mean, I'm not saying that wouldn't help some. I think that's probably just like a, hey, let's do something, keep the shoulder loose and warm. I mean, in reality, you know, you're not going to be able to warm up the labrum and get that heal. So
yeah.
it's more just to make him feel better so he can try play. So it's a little bit, again, not to say it's not going to do anything. I think it's certainly probably helpful to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's just really the question is the stability of the shoulder. And again, that's really going to determine where he goes, both in, you know, obviously season's over now, but in the short term and long term, they clearly felt he was able to play. But yeah, you saw him playing. He did not look like the usual baseball player we were kind of used to seeing. So you could tell it was affecting him for sure.
Absolutely. He's Dr. Crow, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. Big thanks as always, Austin. Best of luck to the boys tonight. We'll be following along and paying attention. And again, tell Coach I said hi as well.
Absolutely. We'll do our best to win and stay warm.
Absolutely.
At least one of the two.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Best of luck. We'll talk soon. Okay, bud?